My why is because I believe every single person deserves to be heard. That every single person has greatness.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Master Your Life. I'm Kate McKay. Thank you so much for joining me and I should say my guest who is today, Simone. Simone, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Me too. So just a quick little bio and then we're going to get after it. I absolutely love it because I was interviewed on your podcast yesterday and
Yes.
to do the same. So it's like the ultimate touche. I
Mhm.
love it. So Simone's an international speaker, award-winning author of the best-selling book, The Extraordinary UnOrdinary You. What a great name. She's also the co-host of a globally ranked podcast, Her Unshakable Confidence, alongside her daughter, Olivia. And Olivia is also a two-time TEDx speaker, and her work has been featured on ABC, NBC, CBS, Entrepreneur Magazine, and Yahoo News. And she's also working on her second book and really passionate about her real method, which we're going to get into today, that she's learned and culled through a life experience of mothering and working and being the creative juice that she is. So thank you. And again, welcome to the show. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Yeah, right on. So we have a lot going on right now, and you and I have been talking a little bit about what's going on in the planet. I mean, you and I just lived through the craziness of the hurricanes in Florida, and that's where I was. So you're in Florida currently, and also the fires that are going in LA. You have some connections there, as I do. And it's so interesting how we can go through this craziness. And how do you think the unshakable confidence concept, the real concept, helps us to be able to be unshakable even through turmoil?
I think a big part of it is when we think of unshakable confidence, it's not like everything is perfect all the time. It's understanding, it's having that foundation when you're going through something difficult that you're just not going to stop. So when I talk about my real method, it's inner work. It's respect your reflection, embrace your failures, ask yourself what you want, and love the woman in the mirror. And the reason I think it's so important is because it's something that I struggled with self-doubt for so long. And I know, Kate, we talked about your confidence and how you show up through thick and thin. I mean, you're unwavering in what you do. And I think a lot of people struggle to show up. So when something gets hard, when something bad is happening, there's this shutdown. And we can't shut down. We have to keep moving forward because growth only happens when we go through those really hard things.
So true. So get into the R part of that reel, if you don't mind. I'd love to hear your journey through the R.
Yeah. So my journey with not having self-respect started when I was a teenager. I had a very abusive boyfriend and I didn't realize how much it affected my entire life moving forward. It took a lot to walk away, and I think there was a lot of shame and a lot of fears. He did threaten to kill me, and that was kind of like the final thing where I said, okay, you're not going to get away if you don't go now. But as I got older, I kept on trying to fill the void with something, right? I switched careers 5 million times. By education, I'm an accountant. We'll talk about failures later, but by education, I'm an accountant. Okay, that does not fit me at all. But I was good at math, and my dad said, you should do this. And again, not asking myself what I wanted, that's what I did. But I didn't realize that all the things I was doing, trying to be what I thought everybody else wanted me to be, that I was not respecting myself. And I think that's so huge because we're taught to respect our elders, we're taught to respect our peers, but I don't ever remember being taught to respect myself. And respecting ourselves is really, we're the most important person that we need to respect, right? Because if we don't respect ourselves, guess how other people treat us? Because we're willing to take it. Well, we shouldn't be willing to take it because, again, we need to respect the most important person, or you need to respect the most important person, which is you.
Mm. And so do you think that that experience of really like a first love, like a first deep love, it created a vacuum in you in a way, huh?
Oh, yeah. And I felt shame. Like I let this happen to myself. That's what I believed for so long, that you did this to yourself. And that is just so backwards. And so the sense of shame. And also, I have great parents, but they didn't talk about stuff like this when they were younger. So when this happened in my life, it was kind of like, just let's move forward. And now they were helpful in the moment to make sure that I didn't go back, but there was no real conversations about like, how can we help you? Like, what do you need? And I think that's so important. Like we talked about with Olivia yesterday, that they're more willing, maybe too willing to share, but they're much more willing to share about stuff. I suppressed this for so long, thinking that I had done something wrong when that was so incorrect.
So you just, it totally personalized that and imprinted in you that sense of unworthiness because we buy into it. I think that's one of the challenges. I mean, you were obviously from, like you said, your parents are great and they expected great things from you. So it's the challenge of being smart and beautiful
Mm,
as you are. You would think that it would be like, oh, wow, like it's cool, like life is easier, but it isn't. And studies show that.
hmm.
And especially if we're brought up in a spiritual family or a family that has strong values and principles, and intimacy is not one of the things that was talked about. Intimate relationships with self, intimate relationship with others. So,
Absolutely not.
yeah, no, absolutely not. So, how did you journey? Because obviously you were counting because you were good with numbers because you were just smart.
Hmm.
So what would you recommend to people who feel that sense of like, I'm good at a lot of things, right? Because clearly you were. I mean, you're creative too, but you're also obviously very strategic in the way you run your business and your life and your family and all of that.
Yeah.
But what would you say to someone that feels like they don't know who they are in the mirror, Simone?
Yeah, I think it's really about going back, asking yourself what you want, which is the hardest question you can ask yourself, I think. Like, what do I really want? But I love to say that look back to where you were as a child. Remember when you were little and you were like, I'm going to be an astronaut, or I'm going to be, there were no limits on what we could do, right? We didn't struggle with self doubt because we were the kids on the playground. You'd walk up to someone and say, be my friend, right? And they were your friend.
Yeah.
We can't do that anymore. Like, well, we should be doing that, but it's very hard to do that now.
Mhm.
So, yeah, it's really taking that step back and saying, okay, what do I really want? And if there were no limits, what would I want to do? It's a reflective process. It's not an easy overnight thing. It's just starting there and being able to say, okay, slowly, how can I move forward from that?
Right. And just taking action, radical action is such a
Yeah.
big part of it. Well, what do you think about the conditioning of women? Because I mean, for me growing up, because I had so classically ADHD and I always felt like I was a boy because it would be like, Mark, John, Harry, Katie, stop talking, sit down. Right. And I'm like, what? I always felt like I was a little bit of a misfit because I didn't fit in with the girls and the cliques and all that. I never was comfortable for me. I always felt like outcasted a little bit from that. And I think from that basis, I think a lot of this self loathing and self doubt for me got manifested and kind of turned around from, oh, hell no, I don't want to feel that way. So I make decisions based on what I don't want. And I
Mhm.
don't think that that's always a bad thing, to be honest. I think that there's a healthy hell no that we all can embrace. And for me, that's the basis of my unshakable confidence is that
Mhm.
whether it's like, oh, hell no, I won't be treated like that, but you can be hell no and live completely in grace. And I think that's the beautiful balance of wisdom. How have you modeled that for your own? Because you have a bunch of kids.
I have a bunch of
I
kids.
have a bunch of kids. How has that been for you being a mother and then having to live through those ages with your own children when you had that deep self doubt and lack of conversations around intimacy?
So I kind of did the opposite with my kids. I have all kinds of conversations with them about everything. And talk about the things that I went through. And it's funny because, especially my girls, they're like, we just can't imagine that happening. We just can't. And they would never say, we can't imagine you let that happen. That's what I used to think, right? But they just said, I just can't imagine that happening because you are so strong, so confident, so all these all these great words that they're applying to me. But it did happen. So really that open communication and it's not just showing them, it is the taking action part. So a few years ago, I actually it's almost 10 years now. Oh, it's crazy. I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and that was a huge taking action. That was really a turning point in my life, doing something completely out of my comfort zone, helping me realize what I was capable of and modeling that behavior for them to see that you can do anything you want to do if you put in the work. I'm not going to go be an astronaut tomorrow. That's not going to work for me. But really, if there's something that you want, you go after your dreams, you go after your goals. You don't just set a goal and say, okay, well, it didn't happen for me, right? Do you really want it? Same thing way, I'm not a fan of New Year's resolutions because if you want something, you can do it any time you want to do it. Don't wait for January because if you wait for January, it means you're making excuses now why you're not going to do it.
Yes, right. And that even just because I was taking notes, I was writing an article on that about the word, to be resolute. There's never an I'm trying. And today or yesterday, I was so funny because I could see the gym from my apartment and I'm like, oh, it was jamming since the first. And then this morning, I'm like, there's no one in there, and like there's still no one in there. I'm so damn nosy, right? Because it's usually like every morning, that's where I'm going as I was leading up to my show. But there's that drop off where people lose their commitment to self. And I think that that's what you modeled when you said, I'm going to climb the freaking mountain for your kids.
Yeah,
You know?
it's about keeping the promises that you make to yourself. I mean, that is
Exactly.
such a huge thing because if we say to ourselves, "Oh, we're going to go do this," and then we don't do it, guess how we feel about ourselves? We feel like crap because we consider that a failure. So it's so important that when you make a promise to yourself, when you make a commitment, you follow through. And don't make commitments that you know you can't do. Don't set yourself up for failure. And don't make promises that you know you're not going to keep because you don't really want to do them. So it really goes back to like, what do you want to do? Do you really want to go run a marathon in 6 months and you've never ever run before? You've never run a 5K? Like you're setting yourself up for failure. It's all about small steps to make sure that you don't feel bad at the end of it.
Right. And also, I think that there's, at some level, there has to be some audacity too, right? And breaking through that it's not really realistic and that's okay too, right?
Yeah.
Building in the pads that, it's okay if you mess up. I mean,
Yeah.
you just keep going, right? You knew that with the hiking. It's an intense foray. I'm super proud of you, boo. That's freaking
Thank you.
impressive. That's
It's
like
one foot in front of the other, small steps, slow progress. You're
through
not trying
that,
to race to the top.
through that.
So, be
Marathon, not
realistic.
race.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I'd love to hear about your your religious background, like how you grew up and the basic principles from your parents that you feel like you embedded into yourself, into your soul, and maybe things that aren't so much true for you. I'm just
Yeah.
curious about how that is because you seem very much like a woman of principle, like really like with strong fortitude you come across. Yes.
Thank you. So I grew up Jewish. My mom actually grew up Catholic and converted to Judaism when she married my dad. And we weren't ever really religious. I mean, yes, we went to synagogue. I did go to Jewish day school until I was 13. What I love about Judaism is the sense of family, it's the connection to community, the traditions. And it's so interesting because I mean, right now we don't want to talk about the world and Judaism, but the biggest lesson I think that I learned growing up was a phrase called tikkun olam, which means repair the world. It was kind of part of everything I
Mm,
knew as a kid. And again, part of what I model with my children is making the world a better place. So
mm,
whether it's through charity work, whether it's through the work that I do with women, it's just my goal is that I want to leave my space in the world better than where I found it. And so that involves sharing my stories, the struggles, the failures, all of those different things. And I think that my kids see that and they want to, I see how they're doing things and I'm like, okay, it's working, right? The more I say, not you have to do this, but this is what I did. And let me show you what's happening right now. I think it really does make such a huge impression on them. And again, I think my parents were, when it came to religion, it was just really about that sense of family. And so when I got married, my husband was Catholic, more agnostic than anything.
Oh my God, you did the opposite.
Yes. And for me, religion is a very personal thing.
Yeah.
So if you want to convert to another religion, again, you have to want it. It's not me telling my husband, oh, you need to be Jewish or I'm not going to marry you. I mean, if you love the person, you love the person, and end of story. We talked about it that we were going to raise the kids Jewish, and good, end of discussion, right? And then we actually went on a trip where it was like a whole Jewish community, and it was the first time in his life that he felt like he was part of community. And so after that trip, he decided to convert to Judaism. So after 20 years of marriage, he converted. And let me tell you, you talk about reading the Old Testament. I mean, he read it the way you do it in Judaism is you read like a section every day for the entire year. And so he did that for like 2 years straight to make sure he really truly understood the religion. He knows way more than I do. Like I'm a beginner, so he informs a lot of the stuff for me because I'm like, I have no clue what you're talking about.
Wow. Isn't it cool? Well, like, think about the different journeys. And I do think that that's true, that the religiosity or the spiritual journey is just so interesting. And we can be the mystic and we can be the intellectual. You know, my son was in a Buddhist monastery, right? I was like, oh my gosh, I have a son that's a priest. You know, that's all I could think of, right? Because he's like meditating and, you know, celibate and everything else. I'm like, oh my gosh, who knew? Right. So it's just, you just never know, but it's that fostering that inner life and the fact that it's a big deal that your mom converted and it's a big deal that your husband converted, but it's also just the faith path of where you feel most at home and accepted and where you're allowed to grow the most. I think that's the biggest thing. I find it very interesting when people are agnostic or don't believe in or whatever. But I'm like, it's going to be harder without thinking that there's something outside of you. Like if you just think you're your own authority, which is true, yes, we are our own authority. But if you think that's it, wow, it seems to me pretty small. It's like, that's why I love nature, because nature reminds me, being in the woods reminds me of the grandiosity, you know, like the trees are like sticks to the heavens. I love feeling all in the magnitude of nature. And for me, that opens up the portal of spiritual awakening for me. I think we all have our way.
I think it's finding what works for you. And also, the biggest thing for me is respecting everyone else along the way, respecting their religion, respecting, and we don't see that very often these days, right? It's if it's not my way, it's not the way. And that's really a shame because I think we have so much to learn from each other by taking the time to understand why people do things the way they do, asking the questions and not just saying, well, I don't do it like that, so I don't want to hear about it, right?
Right. And your daughter talked about that she felt that there was a little too much of that going on in her generation, which I was like, ooh, wow, that's kind of cool. You know, that your belief system is either like, if you don't believe this certain protocol that goes under this umbrella, then your voice isn't really heard. And I think that we have to teach children and younger people and people in general, and as we age, to be open and expansive and stay curious. Because without that, I think we're toast.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you have to stay curious and you have to be willing to listen and to hear instead of just, and we talked about this too, where you see the people who are asking questions and instead of really listening to the person that's talking, they're just foaming at the bit to ask the next thing or say their piece. And you're having this amazing conversation. You can totally learn something from the person you learn something from everyone you meet, right? But by just trying to think that, well, I'm always right and they have no idea what they're talking about. Like, take time to listen. Who knows what you're going to learn?
I know. It seems like it would make me feel so depressed if I felt like I was the only one with authority.
Yeah.
From being from a big family, it's like I'm so used to acquiescing, and I think that there's a pro and a con to that. But I'm not like, if you would think, because I have a strong personality, that I would be the one that'd be like, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. Don't ever ask me to make
That,
don't ever ask me to make a plan. If you, because I'm like, what if you don't like it? What, I'm always like concerned. I'm like, no, you make the plan. And if someone makes a plan, I'm like, oh my God, I'm like in love. There's a certain ways that we have authority over ourselves. And I kind of appreciate it when I can be vulnerable and say, this is an area where I'm really uncomfortable. Are you chill if you take the lead on that? And it's just asking for help.
yeah. We're all human and we should all ask for help. It's not a failure. It's not a weakness. It is part of life. You can't do everything. You can't be great at everything. And if you think that, then where is life to go from here, right? If we're talking about the pursuit of knowledge, right? We go to school for a reason because we want to learn. We try new things. We learn a musical instrument. But if we think we know it all, then what are you going to do the rest of your days?
Yeah, boring. That's why you
Yeah.
and I are
Boring.
podcasters and speakers and
Yeah.
in personal growth space. It's like you and I preaching to the choir.
Yeah. Exactly.
I
Exactly.
know. But yeah, no, I appreciate the audience really tuning in, because I've interviewed some really cool people and I'm grateful that you're one of them. So, what
Thank
are
you.
one of the challenges that you've gone through and the biggest lesson? I would love if you would share that. You talked about that relationship challenge and then just trying to figure out, like, I'm interested in so many things. What is authentically me? What was a big pivot time for you, Boo?
So, I mean, I've had a few, but I'll talk about just in college since we're talking about learning new things. I was sure I was going to be a doctor. My mom was a doctor, which is a great story. My dad was a doctor.
Wow,
My
dude.
sister's a doctor. My husband's a doctor.
Oh,
And so I was pre-med and I took organic chemistry and I failed it. I took it again, I got a D. And I kind of was like, okay, what do I do now? Like my whole life, this is what I thought I was going to do. And at the time, I was struggling so much with self doubt. I didn't ask myself what I wanted, right? I didn't say, well, I said, what are you good at? And my dad said, you're really good at math. You should go into accounting. And I said, well, I think I might want to be an actress. And he was like, you're really good at math. You should go into accounting.
yeah.
And so what did I do? I went into accounting. I became a CPA and it was not for me, right? I practiced for a couple of years and there was nothing that I liked about it. All the accounts out there, thank you for doing what you do because it is really hard work and it takes a certain personality. It was not for me. And that all felt like a big failure to me, right? First, I failed organic and couldn't go to medical school because there's no way they would take me with those grades. Choosing a path where I didn't even like it, but I did it anyways. And so it took me years to really figure out what I wanted. And it was really that pivotal moment of climbing Kilimanjaro where I said, there are no limitations, right? You decide for yourself what you really want. Don't listen to what anybody else is thinking. Don't look at what anybody else is doing. Just be you. And I know that sounds corny, be you, but be real. Be your true self. And that moment really led me to where I am today of realizing that I have a story to share, that I love sharing stories. And if I can change one person's mind about something, that I've really done my job. But I don't look back at my time and say, all those failures, oof, end of the world. I look at them and say, they all brought me to this moment in time. And I wouldn't be the person I am today if I hadn't gone through those things.
Right. It's so true. That's just so powerful. Yeah, it's exactly right. And it's just part of the weaving of the story. I was telling my daughter this today about love, right? Ultimately, that's what we're all here to seek, is the pursuit of love, to love and be loved. There's two things that get in the way of it. And one of them is taking personal responsibility.
Mhm.
And the second one is forgiving other people for not loving us in the way that we felt that they needed to love us and they weren't capable of it, or for whatever reason. And then bringing it back to forgiveness of self, like, hey, I expected to feel a certain way or to do a certain thing, and I forgive myself for wanting something that just couldn't be. And what a journey back. And I really truly believe that that's part of the confidence journey for me. I'm just curious on what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think the forgiveness part is huge. I think that I always say that I can forgive. I'll never forget, right? It's about learning from your mistakes. And if I'm reminded of something that makes me move forward on my path in a different way, but you have to forgive, because if you don't forgive, you're just angry all the time, right? You see these amazing stories of someone, they had some, I don't want to say with your child, because I
Oh,
mean,
but
that's different, but
yeah.
it's the, if someone kills somebody, right? And you see
Yeah.
these families that will come forward and say, I forgive you,
Mm-hmm.
because they need that to heal. And I think that's such an important thing. Like, I went back in time, and unfortunately, the guy who was super abusive to me, he passed away like in his 30s. And
Yeah.
so,
Right.
but I did say it out loud, like, I forgive you,
Yeah.
because I don't want to focus on it anymore. I want to use it as a way to help other women, but it's not about me anymore, right? It's out of my system. Like, I forgave myself and I forgave him and I moved forward. But we have to do that, because otherwise we're stuck in that moment and that's all we think about. And it affects everything
100%.
we do.
And it's also just what I love that you just said is that you made a conscious choice that, hey, I got to go back. I got to meet the maker.
Right.
I got to face that, and I got to let him off the hook, therefore letting me off the hook. And there was a reason why I chose to be in a relationship like that, because there was a lesson for me too.
Mm.
Certainly
Yeah.
wouldn't be where you are now if that wasn't a lesson. And that's even like freaky kind of thing, even thinking about losing my kid, is that it's like I have to find that lesson every day. We
Mm.
have to excavate the lesson sometimes many times over, like an onion, but then always looking through the lens of hope,
Yeah.
always looking for that lens of love, because dude, what else is there?
Yeah. I love what you said about that. Our purpose here is to find love and to give love, right? To get love. How did you say it? Yeah. And I haven't thought about it like that before, but I think it's so true. I've been married to my husband for almost 32 years now, and it's a long time, right?
It's a long
And
time.
it's that idea that we understand how to work together. People ask us all the time, how do you stay married? And I always joke and say, well, neither one of us wanted to get divorced at the same time, or both of us didn't want to get divorced at the same time, right?
Right.
Like, there's
That's a
always a,
benefit.
yeah.
I was listening to somebody about that yesterday, an interview, a podcast, not on Huberman, but I think it was on Soft Wet Underbelly. And he's basically like, if you're in a marriage and you don't have something in the other person that you can help them with, the marriage is over. You
Hmm.
need to always be able to be helping each other do something, whether it's you're
Yeah.
taking care of dogs or you're learning it. It's like you've got to have a hook of where you're helping and bringing value. And if you don't have that, women think, oh, I'm independent, I don't need a man. Well, you're never going to be in a relationship because you have a need. Everyone has a need. We need our ways that we can hook into each other. Remember that game we used to play with as kids with the
The little
monkeys?
monkeys. Yep.
Terrible. Like we need
Barrel monkeys.
that. We
Yeah.
need like the yellow one, the red one.
Yeah. I think that I look at our relationship, and that's really a big understanding of how we've been able to last for that long, is that we're here to support each other, here to help each other. And the communication part is huge. So as soon as you stop communicating, forget about it. Like, how do you know what the other person needs if you don't talk about it? And so that has really kind of made our marriage even stronger as the years have gone by. Now our kids are sometimes grossed out. Like, he comes home and he like kisses me last night at the dinner table, and they're all like, ew. And I'm like, grow up. You
I
should be
know,
so
right?
happy that your parents like
They
each
will.
other.
They
Yeah.
are. They were so
Yeah.
grateful.
Yeah.
Well, you know what I love about that story is that here you went from like this deep self-doubt and a man that made you feel so insignificant and afraid to a extraordinary, I'm going to call it a love affair, dude, because you have to
Yeah.
love each other if you're married that long, right? So I need you to hear this, that just that in itself is a massive testament to love and the journey back to love, because you're modeling it. And I honor you in that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And he really, I mean, Rob's a great guy. He says on a regular basis, "How can I make your life better today?" And
See, this is what I
it's
mean.
like it's such a great way of thinking about it. I don't always say that. I'm like, "What do you need?"
Come on.
I have to change the way I say things, but he's a really great guy. Gosh,
He
I'm really
loves
lucky.
you though, right?
Yeah,
He
absolutely.
loves you as you, and he doesn't expect you to be all that,
I said
all.
today, like my grays are popping, man. I have to dye my hair tonight. We're going out to dinner later. I said I have to dye my hair tonight before I leave for this conference tomorrow morning. And he's like, just go gray. You'll look beautiful gray too. Like he,
Yeah.
he's just, yeah, he's very special.
He loves you, and you
Yeah,
are a woman that's well loved. And I think that that's part of the grounding and the fortitude that you have, that women have a very different vibe when they're well loved.
yeah,
And I think that's a gift you give your children as well.
yeah. I mean, I look at them, and after our son just got married 2 weeks ago, and that that's what we're modeling right there is that she is, and when he said his vows to her, it was so powerful. I think of him at like 2 and a tiny little baby, and he's standing there and he's choking up trying to say these words to her because he loves her so much. And it was like, oh, we were all crying and
Oh, I'd be a mess. Isn't
oh
that beautiful that you
yeah,
get to see
yeah,
that cycle?
yeah. It
Oh
was
my
really,
God,
it was really beautiful.
that's
So
so beautiful. Well, dude, I know you're in an event today, so I just want to say thank you for coming in and meeting up with me and sharing your beautiful story and your beautiful testament to life and love with me. So thank you so much. I appreciate you.
my pleasure. I think you're amazing.
I think you're amazing. So I hope to see you when you're in Atlanta. I may circle you in and come see you. And I just want to say thank you again to the audience for listening, for being part of our intimate storytelling of love and loss and transformation. It's a beautiful thing, and I'm just grateful that you're a part of it. So thanks again. I'll see you again. Take care, everyone.